That's the way it works. There are no credits on commercials.
You got the Clio.
It's your job. I give you money, you give me ideas.
And you never say thank you.
That's what the money is for.
Welcome to Money Unplugged. I'm Chris Hill. Thanks for being here. That's what the money's for. The great John Hamm from the award-winning show Mad Men. And that's appropriate because John Hamm actually comes up in my conversation today with Ben Carlson. He's the director of institutional asset management at Ritholtz Wealth Management. He's the co-host of the investing podcast Animal Spirits, creator of the popular blog A Wealth of Common Sense, and author of several books, including his latest, Risk and Reward: How to Handle Market Volatility and Build Long-Term Wealth. And we got into some great stuff in this conversation. We talked about how he kind of stumbled his way into finance late in his college career, what he learned working through the financial crisis of 2008, and the very creative approach he took to talking about finances with his wife. This one was a blast, so let's get into it with Ben Carlson. You grew up in Michigan, right? You live in Michigan and you grew up in Michigan?
I live in Michigan, yeah.
What's the earliest memory you have when it comes to money?
Probably my parents. I got a lot from them, and it wasn't like they were talking about money all the time. It seemed like a simpler time when people really didn't talk about money, and it was more about their, what I was watching, what they were doing. And my parents didn't spend a lot of money. They're very frugal people. Never had like luxurious cars. Never had super nice houses, and my parents made a pretty decent living, but they came from a time, and their parents, I think, generation taught them, like, material possessions and outward spending. Like, you don't do that. And I think the only thing my dad ever told me about money was just don't carry a credit card balance ever. I remember him telling me that from a young age. Don't carry that. That's the only thing I want you to remember. And so I think partly that stuff got passed down to me, and I was always an early saver because of them. So I'd get like my monthly allowance for lunch at school, and instead of using the money, I'd pocket it and I'd make my own lunches. Like, why would I spend this money when I can? Because my dad said, hey, I'm going to give you money either way. Do what you want with it. You can either spend it at school or you can make your own lunch. And so I'd make my own lunch to save the money.
Did you have a bank account?
I opened a bank account probably at a relatively early age, but I would save it in the piggy bank essentially. I had a wallet, and I'd shove a 20 in there every week or so and save money. And I remember at one point, my brother opened the top drawer. We shared a room, and he opened the drawer and he said, where did you get all this money from? What are you doing? Because I wasn't spending it. I was just saving it. And, I was, 12 years old. And he's like, did you steal this from someone? I said, no, I've been saving it for like 2 years. And that's when my dad was like, all right, let's open a bank account for you and put it in the bank. And I think the first ever investment I made was a CD.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I took the money and I bought a CD, and I was paying like 5% or something. And that's how I learned about how you earn interest. That was the first time I ever learned about that.
Let me go back to your dad and the credit card for a second. Did you ever get a sense from him that he had a bad experience, or was it just his own experience? Like, he didn't have a bad experience with a credit card, but he could see other people who did, and he wanted to warn you about that. Yes.
Yeah. I've never got into financial problems or anything that I know about. I think he's a very disciplined person. And he kind of thought, like, why would you ever do that if you don't have to? If you can avoid paying credit card interest, why would you ever do it? It was kind of just more like a common sense thing.
Any conversations with your friends in middle school about the CD that you bought, and it's not a music CD? It's at a bank?
It is funny. My friends used to always say that I had a secret stash of money. It somehow came up. And I remember like 8th grade, my friends would be like, oh, Ben's got a secret stash of money somewhere. He like saves his money, because I just didn't. I had other friends. I had friends
it's in the top drawer of his bedroom.
Yes. Yeah, it was in cash. Because I had friends who would spend a lot of money. Like, I had a friend who, when he got 16, he turned 16, he got a job, he bought his own car. He's spending money all the time, and that just wasn't me at all.
What was the first job you had when you were a teenager?
I was a busboy at a restaurant. It was terrible.
How long did you last?
I think I did that 2 summers, but I lived in an area with a lot of tourists, so the tips were not bad. Yeah, but I think working in like a service industry like that is probably not a bad thing for people, just to see how people treat you at that sort of job and like see the people who are nice and the people who aren't nice.
Yes. And also, if you've ever worked at a restaurant, then you understand how restaurants actually work.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the inner workings. You know, I'm working with the dishwashers and the waiters and the waitresses and the hosts and the hostesses and all that stuff. Yeah, it gives you a greater appreciation for it.
Yeah, and I also feel like for the rest of your life, if you go to eat at a restaurant and there's any kind of problem, any kind of slow service, having worked in a restaurant, you know what's actually going on. You know
Right.
when the person who's waiting on you is telling the truth, when they're blaming the kitchen, when they're lying. Like you know the inner workings.
Yes, and you know that there's always one person who's out having a smoke breakout back or something when they should be bringing your food out. Or
Let's move on to college. You went to Hope College?
yes,
And what did you want to study when you went there? Or did you have any idea?
I didn't have much of an idea. I remember talking to a guy. I went to a very small high school, and then Hope was a very small college too. Liberal arts, I don't know, 3,000 kids or something. And I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I knew I liked numbers and I liked finance, but it was a liberal arts school. So I studied business and I studied accounting and economics. And I really, until my senior year of college, had zero plans for what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to do something with numbers. I'm kind of an introverted person. I'm fine working with spreadsheets and numbers. I want to be an analyst of some sort. What kind of analyst? I have no idea. So I went away to an internship program in Philadelphia. And for the first week we were there, they have all these, because it was a smaller school, so they had these opportunities to do this stuff. So me and four of my friends went and got an apartment in Philadelphia. We took classes at night and we worked during the day. And it was an internship. We got credit for it for school. And for the first week, they said, here's all this list of companies that you can interview. They'll take you on because you're free paid, unpaid work for them. So go interview at 5 places and see what you like. And one of them was for a stock market analyst. I was essentially helping out sell-side analyst research. So I thought, oh, this is numbers, this is analysis, I'll try this. And I got to work with some people who were following the internet security sector in the industrials and all, and putting the buy, sell, hold ratings on stocks. And that was literally my first introduction to the stock market. I was a senior in college. I thought, I could do something like this.
So do you start investing at that point? Do you take do you still have the CD that you're just like rolling over from middle school?
Yeah. No, I was never like I'm reading the Bear. I remember the first day they said like, you obviously don't know anything, so you're going to read the Wall Street Journal from cover to cover every day when you get in here. That's the first thing you're going to do because you don't know anything, which is true. I think part of the reason I didn't start investing then, I wasn't one of these like college people who was investing, is because it was harder to do back then. The barriers to entry were much higher. I know that like they had some online trading platforms, but the minimums were high, the fees were high, and I probably at the time was more apt to spend the money at the bar with my friends than I was investing. And so I didn't really think about investing until I got a real job a couple of years later. But yeah, that was the time when I started learning about like this is how the stock market works. And I realized like I have a real deficiency here and I need to step up my game and figure this out.
Yeah, what was the goal like right after school? Was it, okay, I have a better direction now that I've spent the internship in my senior year really sort of focusing on the investment world?
Well, I think the biggest eye-opener was I see all these other people interviewing for jobs and they know exactly what they want to do. And I have no idea. And, back then, this is the early 2000s, there weren't as many resources available to help you understand this stuff and figure it out. And I think young kids today that I interact with, like they know immediately what they want to do. They know the types of company they want to work with, the types of people they want to work with, the roles they want to be in. I knew none of that, right? And it's easier to research that stuff now. And so I was probably very naive. I look back at now and go, oh my gosh, what was I thinking? I had no plan. And I kind of just thought like, I'll figure it out. I've always kind of figured stuff out. I'll just figure it out. And the market seemed like a good place to work. And I got a job out of school with a small and institutional consulting firm. And they manage money for pensions and endowments and foundations. It was a small place, and the guy basically said, listen, you're going to come work for me for 2 to 3 years as an analyst, and then you're going to go off somewhere else. I'm going to teach you what I know. You're going to help out. I'm not going to pay you a lot, but you're going to learn a lot. So it was like learning versus earning. And I decided like, I need a lot to learn, and I'm probably don't have enough skill set to earn more money at this point. So I'm going to do this. And it was this guy took me under his wing and taught me everything he knows about managing money for people.
Where are you in the early fall of 2008 when the stock market and therefore your professional world is starting to incinerate?
At that point, I had moved on to another job, and I was on the investment team for an endowment fund. And so there's a billionaire family in West Michigan that left the bulk of their estate to fund cancer and neurodegenerative research, so like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease, at a privately held medical research institute. So usually that kind of research is done at colleges and universities. There's a couple private ones that do it, and they decided that that's what they wanted to do because those kind of diseases ran in their family. But they had an endowment fund that essentially kept the lights on. And they said, hey, listen, the scientific researchers can go here and do all the research, and the investments are going to keep the lights on so you don't have to pay for that overhead. And so it was called an endowment fund, but it was more like a pension because there was a big payout every year that had to keep the place running until they could get enough grants and stuff for funding. And so I came there in the summer of 2007, right when like a bunch of credit hedge funds started blowing up. And I remember distinctly that like, okay, this seems weird. And then in October in the fall, the S&P was up again. It was up like 10% on the year heading into October of 2007. And I was like, all this financial crisis stuff, people, what are they? Bear Stearns blew up a few months ago. Everything's fine. I still think going through that at my stage of life where I was still relatively young in my career was one of the best things that's happened for me. I learned a lot about how people react to these kind of things, the incentive structure and career risk and all that stuff. Living through it, it was such a scary time, but I was so young still. It wasn't as scary to me, or it was more exciting than anything. Because I was like the low man on the totem pole still. I was in the analyst position at this place in an investment office. And I'm learning, and luckily, all the money for this estate took so long to settle and go through all this reams and reams of lawyers that like we were sitting on a lot of cash, so we could reinvest during then. So from an investment perspective, we actually ended up okay. But I learned about how people react to risk after like that big kind of, nuclear bomb type of risk happens, how people react to it. And what I saw in the professional investment field was everyone was in the fetal position. Coming out of that, everyone was just like, that's it. We're black swan funds, downside hedges. We're putting more money into hedge funds, even though they didn't really protect us that much. And they doubled down on protection. And I'm sitting there thinking, the stock market was just down almost 60%. And sure, it's scary and people are worried about double dip recessions. And back then, there's no way I could have known that the bull market we were setting up for would last as long as it has. But I was thinking that this is no time. Like, this is the time to put your foot on the gas a little bit, isn't it? I've read all the Buffett books. This is the, fearful when greedy and greedy when fearful. And but I learned a lot about career risk and people who said, no, I'm trying to save my job. I know all this stuff, but if I take too much risk and something else bad happens, I'm out of a job. And so I don't care what the history books say. I'm taking way less risk and I'm going to be way more conservative.
Were there meetings that you were in where you were, if not the lone voice, at least maybe you're in the minority? You're one of the people in the room saying, I really think this is the time to put our foot on the gas.
A little bit. And I was still sort of the low man on the totem pole there. So my voice probably didn't.
That's really what I'm thinking is my voice were there meetings when that happened? And also, what was the reaction?
Yeah. And part of it too was at first when I got into that world, because these institutions, these endowments and foundations, like they're, it's really smart people you're dealing with. Not only that are running the money, but all the managers you're dealing with. We're talking to private equity managers and hedge funds and venture capitalists and actively managed SMA managers for equities and fixed income. And these people are ridiculously smart. And so my first impression was, wow, these are like the smartest people in the room every time. And they know exactly what they're talking about. And then a few years go by and I realized like, oh, these people are very smart, but they're not smarter than the market. And that was the thing that I was beating my head against is like, what if we, instead of trying to do all this and we're putting a lot of work in to trying to like beat these benchmarks and beat our peers in the endowment world, what if we just kept things a little simpler? And that was what I was trying to get across is like, let's just simplify. And that was another career risk thing. Like, you don't understand. This is what like the rich board of directors wants. They want this complicated stuff. They want to brag about this. And I said, oh, okay. So yeah, that was a very eye-opening experience for me to get that where I was just kind of, I realized like, oh, I'm shouting into the wind here. Like no one's listening no one wants to hear this in this space, or if they do, there's few and far between for the opportunities. And that's when I started thinking like eventually I gotta like move out. Like it was very intellectually stimulating to like run a portfolio of that size with that much like depth and breadth of investing options. But I'm like, I can't. I'm kind of like a principled guy, I guess I would say. That sounds like I'm bragging. Maybe I am, but I couldn't stay in a job where I didn't agree with the way that they were doing things.
That sounds like a good principle to hold. What was happening in your professional life that made you decide to spend the time and money to get your MBA?
I knew I needed to do something, and I thought I need some sort of jumping off point that's going to get me something. And it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to go get an MBA and it's going to like change my life. It was more like I need to start meeting more people. And I mentioned I'm a kind of introverted person. I need to get out there and build a better network. And I'm living in West Michigan, was not like the financial hub of the world. I need to do something if I'm going to, I have a good job and it's, like I said, intellectually stimulating, but if I want to do something else, I got to try something. And my company said, hey, we're going to pay for 90% of it. So I said, all right, at nighttime, I'm going to go back to school and get my MBA. And that actually worked out pretty good because I took a class that had a project of, hey, take your knowledge and build something that you can share with other people and present it to us. And I had a guy in the class who had started his own blog, and he explained to me how to do it. And he said, I do my own blog and I use Google AdSense to pay for it or something. And I put it on this server. And this is obviously before Substack and all these things. And I kind of thought, well, gosh, if this guy can do it, I can do it. And I thought like, I need like some sort of outlet because I want to get these ideas out that no one is listening to me spouting off at work. Like I want to get them out some way. And so that's why I started writing. And it was all because of a class I took in my MBA. So the MBA itself, the classes, didn't help me all that much. But like it forced me to try something new, which was, I think, the point of it.
I want to tell you about a tool that a lot of you are going to find genuinely useful. It's called Ticker. 500,000 investors are already using it. And once you see what it does, you will understand why. Ticker gives you access to the same data Wall Street pros use, years of financials, analyst forecasts, insider trades, all in one place. You can even track big-name money managers to see exactly what they are buying and selling. It's like having your own personal Bloomberg terminal without paying $30,000 a year for it. The whole thing is clean, simple, and built for people who want to look deeper into any stock without needing an advanced degree to do it. Just go to Ticker, type in any public company, and everything you need is right there. And you can try it for free at ticker.com/unplugged. That's TIKR.com/unplugged. All right, let's get back to Ben. How much did you and your wife talk about money before you got married?
It's funny. I gave my wife a PowerPoint presentation before we got married.
That wasn't your proposal, was it?
No. It was kind of like starting to have the money conversations. And it was kind of like, well, how are we going to, because she got a job at a hospital and they had a 403B plan or something. And she kind of said, like, how are we going to save money for retirement? Like, what do we do? And I said, we're going to put all our money into stocks. We're young. We can take risks. And she said, no way. Stock market is way too risky. And this is, right after we'd seen this huge crash. And I said, all right, well, let me explain it to you, like how in plain English, not too complicated, like why we're going to invest in stocks. And I created a bunch of charts. And I think I got through like 2 charts. And she's like, all right, fine. We'll do what you said. I can't even take this anymore. But I'm like, no, we're going to go through this. And it's funny. That was like, I think that was the initial foray into me wanting to like, the whole me starting a blog was to explain stuff like this to my audience. Originally was my friends and my family, the people who, hey, you're the finance guy. What do you think about this? What's the stock market going to do? What stock should I pick? Whatever it is. And I said, all right, this is the audience that like obviously needs more, I don't know, education or just context or whatever. And maybe that's why I wanted to start writing, is just to write to them. And I'm going to answer questions from my friends and family so they can stop asking me about them. And like, if you got a question, go here. I'm going to put up a bunch of stuff for you to read. And that was the idea behind the blog.
I like that your wife was just like, look, we can invest however you want. Just don't make me sit through the rest of this presentation.
Exactly. She learned her lesson.
Before we go to the speed round, your new book is dedicated to your brother, John, who passed away last year. And Very sorry for your loss. This is something you've written about, something you've talked about on the podcast. One of the interesting things that you've written about him that struck me was your brother's approach to money. You described him as conservative in his approach to saving and investing, but also he was not immune to splurging when he felt like something was worth splurging on. And so he strikes me as someone who understood money in ways that some people in the financial industry never really figure out. And so I'm curious, what did John teach you about money that you could not have learned from a book?
Yeah, I think it's the cognitive dissonance of having two competing ideas in your head at the same time. I think he was very good at that, like being this enigma that would have this one really hard principle over here, but also this other one over here. And I think it's almost about being like selectively cheap. Like he was a selectively cheap person in a lot of ways. But I also think the big takeaway from his experience was just how much your life experiences can shape your views of risk and money. And I think that's something that people don't probably work through enough on. Like, how is this thing that I've lived through, whether it's family events or it's the way that you were raised, or it's just maybe the wiring of your brain, the way that you were born, your internal wiring, understanding yourself and the things that make you tick and the things that, bring you stress and anxiety and fear and all these things. I think he had a pretty good handle on that, actually. And I think that's a hard place for a lot of people to get is, boy, how do I understand what the right risk profile and time horizon is for me? Not like the other people I'm watching, not the people I see on social media. What is my personal, and I think trying to optimize for yourself rather than other people makes a lot of sense. And I think that's the hard part is you don't know when you see the outwardly stuff from other people and their money and their spending, and you don't know what the inward stuff is, right? The risks they took to get there, the challenges, the stress that they took, how much debt they took, whatever it is. And so I liked that he was able to separate these things and able to have the two competing ideas in his head at once of the very conservative in some areas, but also very adventurous and outgoing in other areas.
Let's go to the speed round. What is a thing you have bought that makes you happy?
Oh, this is one thing I've changed my mind about most in old age is that actually material possessions can make you happy. I know that's always the finance thing. And
yes, they can.
My family in recent years bought a boat, and people always say, like, buying a boat, you bust out another $1,000, right? A boat is so expensive, and it's just a big money pit. And you know what? All that stuff is true. You have to store the boat, you have to pay a lot for the gas. The boats themselves cost a lot of money, and you have to find a dock somewhere, or trailer, or whatever. But it's time outside on the water for my family and I, and it's away from screens, and it's away from, phones and social media and news and all these things. And I love being on the water. And so even though it costs a lot of money to buy a boat, it's one of the best purchases I've ever made.
One of my college buddies, Joe, if he's listening right now, he is nodding and smiling because he's my college friend who has a boat. Have you ever made a purchase that you regret and sometimes you find yourself still thinking about it?
It's interesting. My wife and I had a conversation recently about the Christmases we're giving for our kids. My wife, Christmas is her favorite holiday by far. It's her favorite time of the year. She goes all out, and she loves to have the Christmas tree look great with the presents under the tree. And each kid gets their own same number of presents. Like, hey, if they get 10 presents, they get 10 presents, right? But we realize that a lot of it is just stuff. And my kids don't really care about stuff that much. They care, they get a toy or something or a game, and they play it once, and then they kind of move on. We even got them like a Nintendo, and they used it for a month, and then they stopped using it. Because my kids, they like playing sports, they like being outside, they like doing experiences. So my wife and I said, why do we keep doing this? Why do we keep getting them stuff when the only thing they've told us that they want experiences? They want to go to the college basketball game, or they want to go to the Detroit Lions football game. They want to go on a vacation. Why don't we have these be our presents, these experiences, instead of just having the boxes there because it looks pretty on Christmas morning? And so that's something that we're changing, that why don't we do these things that they actually enjoy and get something out of, as opposed to just spending money for the sake of spending money?
What's the last thing you splurged on just for yourself?
I'm not going to lie. I'm kind of a clothes person. When I was growing up, my parents would never get me the new shoes or the new clothes. And we always shopped at the worst stores, and I always wanted to dress nicer. And so now that I got there, and I have my own money, I probably spend more money on myself on clothes and shoes than my wife does. And she always gives me crap about it because, oh, look, another box came for Ben. Look, he's got another new sweater or something. And back to the material possession thing. Like if sometimes wearing a nice new sweater or shirt actually does bring me joy in life, which is strange to say. So that's something that I don't mind splurging on is like clothes and shoes.
What is one thing about money that you wish you knew earlier in life?
Oh, I think the thing that you don't realize at a young stage is just how money's not going to bring contentment. I don't even think it's like happiness that you should be shooting for. It's contentment. And it's kind of this interesting dichotomy that the goalposts are always moving. If I would just make this much money, I'd be happy. If I would have this much money, I'd be happy. And it's funny because I've come to realize that those goalposts are always going to move. Like, no, I don't think there is really enough for anyone. I don't think anyone actually has this level. Like, this is enough. Now I'm good. But I think that's actually good for humanity. It's like bad for your internal self-worth, right? That you can never be just content with what you have. But it's actually good for humanity because it makes people strive to keep doing better and push. And because you see all these really, really absurdly rich people out still doing stuff. And you go, why aren't you just golfing? Why aren't you just on the beach?
Right.
You have all the money in the world. And I think there's something to it that we humans aren't satisfied unless we're doing something. And I think money is the thing that doesn't fill that hole.
What is a charitable cause that you'd like to support?
Oh, good one. It's funny. That's a great question because no one ever talks about this in like the personal finance circles. And I tell a lot of people that like just like you automate your savings for retirement, you should automate your charitable contributions too. And so I actually got reached out to by someone who was a blog reader. They run this program, and working in the nonprofit space opened up my eyes to a lot of these different programs that they have like in local communities. And there's this organization called Rack It Up Detroit. And they take a lot of these inner city kids who don't have a lot of structure in their life, and they have an after-school program. And the whole idea is to help these kids graduate high school, then graduate college, and then place them at a job. And that's their whole goal. And one of the ways they have these kids stay out of trouble is they teach them how to play squash. And they come to school and they play squash, which is, I guess it's kind of like racquetball a little bit. I've never, I've played, and it's this like inner city program. They teach these kids how to play squash, and they try to keep these kids out of trouble, and it works. And I don't do a lot of volunteering or anything, but I give some money to them.
Do you have a favorite movie or TV series that has money as a through line?
A current one right now that I'm enjoying is called Your Friends and Neighbors on Apple TV with John Hamm, because it's about these rich people in the outskirts of New York, hedge fund managers, and they all have these huge houses, and they'll spend money on watches and nice cars and art and all these things. And he goes around and he robs his friends of this stuff that they never notice it's gone. He turns into like a home invader. And I think they really show back to that thing about contentment, like how having all this money in these 10,000 square foot houses often isn't times enough. And then you get that stuff and you kind of still look at yourself in the mirror and go, okay, now what?
Last thing is a penny for your thoughts. And this is just any sort of wisdom that you've picked up along the way that you want to share with people who are listening. And it doesn't have to be about money. It can be about anything. When
I sign books for people, I always write less is more. I think that's my guiding principle to life, that less is. I think that applies, again, not just to investing, but many other areas of life. And I think that the idea of that simplifying things more than trying to make them more complicated is easier in all facets of your life. And that's kind of the words I live by.
There you go. Ben's new book, Risk and Reward, How to Handle Market Volatility and Build Long-Term Wealth, comes out on May 12th. Pick up a copy. The guy is a great writer. I'm Chris Hill. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next week.